The high plains of eastern New Mexico in late September carry a particular kind of wind. Not the warm desert breath of Albuquerque or Santa Fe, but something drier and meaner, something that blows off the caprock of the Llano Estacado and scours the flat streets of Clovis like sandpaper on raw wood. It pushes tumbleweeds against chain-link fences and makes the cottonwoods along the irrigation ditches shudder and lean. It gets into everything. It was September 22nd, 1983, a Thursday. The wind had been blowing since morning. At 5:40 p.m., inside the small yellow brick house at 917 Norris Street in Clovis, New Mexico, 31-year-old Ramona Esperanza Delgado Ibarra was changing out of her work clothes. She had spent the day behind the circulation desk at the Clovis Carver Public Library on Mitchell Street, where she had worked for 4 years, and the dust that came through the library's inadequate front door seal had settled in a fine layer on her dark hair. She was running the tap in the bathroom sink, tilting her head forward to rinse it out, humming something. Her neighbor, 58-year-old Doris Fort, could hear it faintly through the shared fence. Ramona was going to her cousin's quinceañera at the Guadalupe Parish Hall on Pyle Street. She had a new dress hanging on the closet door. Deep red, sleeveless, with a modest hem she had sewn an inch lower herself because her aunt would have opinions otherwise. Her gift, wrapped in gold paper and sitting on the kitchen table, was a small gold cross on a chain she had saved 3 paychecks to buy. She had written the card in her careful librarian's cursive. When she was going to do her hair up, she was going to dance. Doris Fort heard the humming stop at around 6:10 p.m. She heard Ramona's screen door open and close. She heard the familiar sound of Ramona's 1979 Chevrolet Chevette, burgundy, backing out of the driveway. The Chevette never arrived at the Guadalupe Parish Hall. By 7:45 p.m., Ramona's cousin Yolanda Delgado, the birthday girl's older sister, was calling the Norris Street house with no answer. By 8:30, Ramona's mother, 62-year-old Petra Delgado, was pacing the parish hall parking lot. By 9:15, Ramona's younger brother, 24-year-old Tomas Delgado, had driven the route between Norris Street and the parish hall 4 times. He found the Chevette on the 5th pass. It was parked, abandoned, on the gravel shoulder of Llano Estacado Boulevard at the far northeastern edge of Clovis, where the street grid gave way to open caliche flats and the darkness was absolute. The driver's door was unlocked. The red dress was gone. Ramona had been wearing it. The gold-wrapped gift was still on the passenger seat. One black low-heeled pump lay on its side in the gravel beside the front tire. Ramona Esperanza Delgado Ibarra was gone, and the Llano Estacado wind blew across that empty ground like it always had, indifferent and cold, erasing everything. Before we dive into this chilling story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love cases solved after decades, don't forget to hit subscribe to stay updated on more stories. Clovis, New Mexico, in 1983 was a city of about 32,000 people, sitting almost exactly on the Texas state line in Curry County, a place that existed because of 2 things: the Santa Fe Railway and Cannon Air Force Base. The base, 7 miles west of town on Highway 60, brought a rotating population of military families who sometimes stayed and sometimes didn't, layering the community with a transient quality that sat alongside the deep roots of the old agricultural and Hispanic families who had been there for generations. The economy ran on farming, mostly grain sorghum and cotton on the flat, irrigated fields of the Llano Estacado, and on the base and on the retail and service work that served both. It was not a glamorous city, but it was a real one, with its own rhythms and loyalties and griefs. The streets in the older neighborhoods were wide and flat, and lined with cottonwoods going yellow in late September. The smell in the evenings was alfalfa and diesel and, when the wind shifted, the particular dryness of the caprock dust. Ramona Esperanza Delgado Ibarra was born on February 14, 1952, at what was then the Clovis Memorial Hospital, the eldest of 5 children born to Arturo Delgado and Petra Delgado, née Montoya. Her father drove a grain truck for Curry County Agricultural Cooperative for 30 years. Her mother kept the home, raised the children, made tamales at Christmas that people drove 20 miles to taste. Ramona's siblings were Tomas, born 1959, twin girls Cecilia and Rosa, born 1962, and the youngest Ernesto, born 1965. Ramona was the one who read. From the time she was 8 years old, and Petra took her to the Clovis Carver Library for the first time. Ramona had treated books the way other children treated playgrounds. She grew up in the stacks. She knew the Dewey Decimal System by the time she was 11. She wanted to be a librarian, the way some children want to be astronauts, with a certainty so complete, it never wavered. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall, with black hair she wore in a thick braid down her back, dark brown eyes behind gold-framed glasses with slightly oversized lenses that were fashionable in the early 1980s, and a calm, steady face that her co-workers said could quiet a room of noisy children just by turning toward them. And she had a small tattoo of a hummingbird on her left inner wrist, something she'd gotten at 19 from a cousin's friend with a homemade kit, a fact she found embarrassing and funny in equal measure. She weighed 128 pounds and had the posture of someone who had been told to stand straight her whole life and had listened. She had graduated from Clovis High School in 1970, attended Eastern New Mexico University in Portales, 30 miles south, and earned a degree in library science in 1974. She had worked briefly at the Roswell Public Library before returning to Clovis in 1979 to take the circulation desk position at Clovis Carver and be closer to her aging father, who had been diagnosed with diabetes. She was not currently in a serious relationship. She had been engaged in 1977 to a man named Robert Cassus, but the engagement had ended. Amicably, she insisted, though Petra Delgado had opinions. And since then, Ramona had dated casually, focused on her work, her family, and her books. She had recently enrolled in a graduate correspondence course through the University of New Mexico, working toward her Master of Library Science. Her coursework sat in a manila folder on her kitchen table most evenings. She lived alone at 917 Norris Street, a house she rented for $240 a month from a landlord named Glenn Whitfield. The house was tidy and full of books, floor-to-ceiling shelves her father had built for her. And she had a grey cat named Catalina, who slept on top of the tallest shelf and was, by all accounts, imperious and beloved. On September 22nd, 1983, Ramona had worked the 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. shift at the library. She had helped a 10-year-old boy find books about dinosaurs and spent 45 minutes on the phone with the state library system about a cataloging discrepancy. She had eaten a bean and cheese burrito at her desk at noon. On her way home, she had stopped at Allsup's on Prince Street for a bottle of Dr. Pepper, which the cashier, 16-year-old Marcus Webb, would later remember, because she had asked him if they had the smaller bottles, and he'd said no, and she'd laughed and bought the big one. She had arrived home around 5:30 p.m. She had fed Catalina. She had changed out of her work clothes, washed her hair in the bathroom sink, begun getting ready for the quinceañera. She had been humming. She had been happy. At approximately 6:10 p.m., she left. The Guadalupe Parish Hall on Pyle Street was 2.1 miles from 917 Norris Street by the most direct route, south on Norris to Llano Estacado Boulevard, west on Llano Estacado through the commercial stretch, then south on Pyle Street to the church complex. In 1983, this was an entirely ordinary drive through the lit streets of Clovis in the early evening. It should have taken 8 minutes. At 6:10 p.m., Ramona's neighbor Doris Fort heard the Chevette back out of the driveway. Doris was in her kitchen and had a partial view of the street through the window. She did not see anything unusual. At 6:22 p.m., based on the timeline established later, Tomas Delgado, driving his own truck on Norris Street, heading toward the parish hall for the party, passed the intersection of Norris and Llano Estacado. He did not see his sister's car, and he did not know she had just left. At 6:40 p.m., the quinceañera reception began. Ramona's seat at the family table was empty. At 7:45 p.m., the calls began. At 9:37 p.m., Tomas Delgado's headlights swept across the burgundy Chevette on the gravel shoulder of Llano Estacado Boulevard, approximately 0.6 miles east of the intersection with North Commerce Way, at the far edge of the city's developed area. Beyond the shoulder, the Caliche Flat stretched unbroken into darkness toward the Texas line. There were no businesses, no residences, no streetlights at this location. The nearest lit structure was a grain elevator facility a quarter-mile west. Tomas pulled over and got out. He walked around the car calling Ramona's name. He found the passenger door locked, the driver's door unlocked. Through the window, say his flashlight showed the gold-wrapped gift on the passenger seat, undisturbed. He found the single black low-heeled pump on the gravel beside the front left tire. He could see, in the beam of his flashlight, that the caliche dust on the shoulder was disturbed, not in a way that told him anything specific, but disturbed. He drove to the nearest phone, a payphone at a Texaco station on Commerce Way, and called the Clovis Police Department at 9:44 p.m. Patrol officers Dennis Crowell, 28, and Angela Reyes, 26, of the Clovis Police Department responded at 9:58 p.m. They secured the Chevette and the immediate area, stringing yellow scene tape between their two cruisers. Detective Sergeant Paul Mondragon, 44, arrived at 10:22 p.m. and assumed scene command. Examination of the Chevette in the cruiser lights revealed the engine was off, the keys were in the ignition, the handbrake was set. The interior was undisturbed except for the absent driver. There was no blood visible. The driver's side window was down approximately 2 inches. The passenger seat held the gold gift, a small vinyl purse containing Ramona's wallet, library ID, and $14 in cash. At 10:55 p.m., Officer Reyes found, in the caliche dust approximately 12 feet from the driver's door at a 90-degree angle toward the open flat, a pair of gold-framed glasses with one lens cracked. They were Ramona's. Curry County Sheriff's Deputy Frank Armichaud, 31, arrived at 11:10 p.m. to assist. A preliminary sweep of the flat north of Llano Estacado Boulevard using cruiser spotlights and officer flashlights found nothing. The dust bore marks that could have been disturbance or could have been wind-driven. No definitive tracks. At 11:45 p.m., Detective Mondragon drove to the Delgado family home on Thornton Street, Arturo and Petra's home, to notify the family. Petra Delgado opened the door before he knocked. She had been watching from the window since Tomas had not come back. When she saw the detective's face, she said, "Dios mío, Dios mío." Arturo Delgado, sitting in the front room, stood up and said nothing at all. He simply put his hand on the wall beside him to steady himself. The Chevette was towed to the Clovis Police Impound Yard on Cameo Boulevard at 2 a.m. Case number CPD-1983-2241 was opened before dawn. Detective Sergeant Paul Mondragon had been with the Clovis Police Department for 19 years. He was a solid, thick-set man of 50, dark-complexioned, with a broad mustache that had gone grey at the corners, and heavy-lidded eyes that gave him a sleepy look that people routinely mistook for inattention until they sat across a table from him in an interview room. He had grown up in Clovis, gone to Clovis High, worked a brief stint at the grain co-op before joining the department at 21. He knew this city the way you know a place you've policed for 2 decades. its corners and habits, its people and their histories. He took personal charge of CPD 1983-2241 on the morning of September 23rd. The search of the Llano Estacado Boulevard area was organized in coordination with the Curry County Sheriff's Office, the New Mexico State Police District 9 office in Clovis, and the Cannon Air Force Base Security Police, who volunteered personnel. Waste search operations ran from September 23rd through September 28th, covering approximately 1,100 acres of caliche, flats, farm fields, irrigation ditches, and road shoulders in the northeastern quadrant of Clovis and the surrounding rural areas. Total searches involved: 83. Total search hours logged: 1,614. Agencies involved: Clovis Police Department, Curry County Sheriff's Office, NMSP District 9, Cannon AFB Security Police, Clovis Volunteer Search and Rescue Team. 3 K9 units were deployed. Dogs handled by NMSP officers Ruben Arenas, Carla Whitehorse, and CPD officer Steve Dunn. An aerial survey was conducted by a NMSP fixed-wing aircraft on September the 24th and 25th. Ramona Delgado Ibarra was not found. Evidence collected from the Chevette, and the scene was processed by CPD forensic technician Walter Odom, number 36 E5501. One black low-heeled pump, women's size 7, right foot, leather, recovered from gravel shoulder beside left front tire. E5502. One pair gold-framed eyeglasses, women's, one lens cracked, recovered from caliche dust approximately 12 feet north of driver's door. E5503. One gold-wrapped gift box, approximately 8 by 4 inches, recovered from passenger seat. Contents intact. Gold cross necklace, unwrapped during evidence examination. E5504. One vinyl clutch purse, black, containing wallet, library ID card, $14 cash, chapstick, recovered from passenger seat. E5505. Fingerprint lifts from driver's door, interior and exterior steering wheel, gear shift. Submitted to NMSP Crime Lab, Santa Fe. E5506. Trace evidence vacuum from driver's seat and carpet. Submitted NMSP Crime Lab. E5507. Soil/caliche samples from shoulder disturbance area. A 5508. Hair sample, single long dark hair, recovered from driver's headrest. Submitted NMSP Crime Lab. The NMSP Crime Lab returned fingerprint results by October 12th. Prints from driver's door and steering wheel consistent with Ramona's own. One partial print on the exterior driver's door handle, palm edge, insufficient for database search with available technology. Trace evidence from E5506 included a fragment of olive green synthetic fiber, origin undetermined. Hair in E5508 matched Ramona's known samples from her hairbrush. Mondragon interviewed 61 witnesses in the first month. The most significant, Doris Fort, 58, neighbor, confirmed Ramona's 6:10 p.m. departure. Nothing unusual. No vehicles parked on Norris Street that she noted. Marcus Webb, 16, Allsup's cashier, confirmed Ramona's stop at approximately 5:50 p.m., described her as cheerful and unhurried. Leonard Pruitt, 54, grain elevator night watchman. Working the grain elevator facility on Llano Estacado Boulevard, approximately 0.25 miles west of the vehicle recovery site. He told Mondragon that between approximately 6:20 and 6:35 p.m., he had seen headlights stopped on the shoulder to the east. He had not thought anything of it. Car trouble was common on that stretch, and had not looked closely. He described seeing a second set of headlights stop behind the first, briefly, then both sets of lights going dark. He had assumed it was someone helping a stranded motorist. He had not reported this because he had not heard about the missing woman until the following morning. This was the most critical witness account of the initial investigation. Robert Casos, 33, Ramona's former fiancé, now married, living on Thornton Street, 3 blocks from the Delgado family home. He had a full alibi for the evening. He had been at the quinceañera with his wife Marlene since 6:30 p.m., confirmed by multiple attendees. Mondragon cleared him within 48 hours. Mondragon developed 3 primary suspect theories. Someone who knew Ramona's schedule, her route, and the timing of the quinceañera had waited for her. This required either inside knowledge of her plans or prolonged surveillance. Mondragon examined Ramona's daily contacts, library patrons, neighbors, former relationships. The unknown driver who had stopped behind Ramona's Chevette was the key. Mondragon canvassed extensively for vehicles reported in that area on the evening of September 22nd. He assembled a list of 33 vehicles identified by various witnesses as traveling Llano Estacado Boulevard that evening. None produced a viable suspect. Given Canon AFB's proximity and the rotating population it brought, Mondragon considered whether an individual passing through, someone not rooted in the community, had been responsible. This theory was difficult to investigate and ultimately produced nothing actionable. One individual emerged as a person of interest: Dwight Aaron Loomis, 36, who worked as a civilian contractor at Canon AFB and lived in a rented house at 2204 Norris Street, approximately 14 blocks from Ramona's house. Loomis had been seen by 2 neighbors near the Llano Estacado Boulevard stretch on multiple occasions in the weeks before the disappearance and drove a 1981 Ford F-150, pickup dark green. He had no criminal record. He submitted to a voluntary interview on October 5th and provided an alibi. He claimed he had been at the Clovis Inn Lounge on Prince Street from 6 p.m. until closing. That was partially corroborated by the bartender, but could not be definitively confirmed for the relevant window between 6:15 and 6:45 p.m. A voluntary polygraph on October 19th was administered by NMSP agent Dolores Trujillo and returned inconclusive results. Mondragon could not move further on Loomis without additional evidence. The olive green synthetic fiber from E5506 was analyzed as consistent with military-issue fabric, specifically the type used in standard U.S. Army utility trousers or field jackets of the early 1980s. This was notable given the proximity to Canon AFB, but Clovis had a large military and veteran population, and the fiber alone narrowed nothing. By the spring of 1984, with no body found, no physical evidence linking a suspect, and the witness lead from Leonard Pruitt producing no identification of the second vehicle, case CPD 1983-2241 was moved to inactive status on April the 17th, 1984. Detective Mondragon formally requested the case remain assigned to him personally, a request granted, but active investigative resources were redirected. Dwight Loomis left Clovis in August 1984 when his contractor position at Canon ended. He moved to Lubbock, Texas, 70 miles east. The case, as a practical matter, went cold. Petra Delgado lit a candle for Ramona every Friday evening for 23 years, until her eyesight failed and she could no longer safely manage it, at which point her daughter-in-law began lighting it for her. Arturo Delgado, whose diabetes had been progressing before Ramona's disappearance, died in 1989. His family said he never recovered from not knowing. He was buried in the Cavalry Cemetery on Thornton Street, and Petra arranged a small marker beside his for Ramona. And not a grave, because there was no grave, but a memorial, with Ramona's name and birth year, and a space where the death year should have been and wasn't. Tomas Delgado took it the hardest and the loudest. He wrote letters to the Clovis Police Department in 1985, 1987, 1990, 1993, and 1998. He attended every public meeting where crime was discussed. He put up flyers every few years around Clovis and across the Texas border in Lubbock and Amarillo. He hired a private investigator in 1991, a man named Gerald Fitch from Albuquerque, who spent 4 months reviewing the case and produced a 20-page report suggesting Dwight Loomis warranted further scrutiny. The CPD reviewed Fitch's report, noted that Loomis was now in Lubbock and had no Texas criminal record, and filed the report in the case box. Detective Sergeant Paul Mondragon retired from the Clovis Police Department in 1997 after 33 years. At his retirement party at the Elks Lodge on Main Street, he gave a short speech in which he said he was proud of most of what he'd done, and haunted by one case he hadn't been able to close, and everyone in the room knew which case he meant. He died of prostate cancer in June 2004. He was 70 years old. Case file CPD-1983-2241. 4 case folders, 2 evidence boxes, 1 box of photographs was stored in the Clovis Police Department Records Archive on Cameo Boulevard in a steel cabinet designated COLD 8312. The NMSP Crime Lab had retained the biological evidence, the hair sample, the fiber. In 1983, DNA profiling did not exist as a forensic tool. By the time it did, the early 1990s, the hair sample from E5508 had been determined to be Ramona's own and was not the focus. The partial palm print from E5505 sat inert without a matching suspect print to compare it to. The olive green fiber sat in its evidence envelope. The technology of the era had simply reached its limit. The Clovis News Journal ran anniversary pieces in 1993 and 2003. The 2003 piece, on the 20th anniversary, included a photo of Petra Delgado, then 82, holding a photograph of Ramona. Her quote, "She was going to a party. She was wearing a red dress. She was happy. That's how I remember her. I just want her brought home." The case remained unsolved. Dwight Aaron Loomis, in Lubbock, lived quietly. In March 2021, the Clovis Police Department established a cold case review protocol in partnership with the New Mexico Department of Justice's Violent Crime Unit. The initiative was prompted by a state-level grant specifically targeting unsolved cases from the 1970s and 1990s with preserved biological evidence. The investigator assigned to review the Clovis cold case backlog was CPD Detective Eleanor Marisol Vega, 35, a 12-year veteran who had joined the department straight out of New Mexico State University's Criminal Justice Program and had spent the previous 4 years in the Sex Crimes and Violent Crimes Unit. Vega was meticulous and unhurried. Colleagues called her the most patient detective they had worked with, meaning it entirely as a compliment. She had grown up in Portales, 30 miles from Clovis, and had heard about the Ramona Delgado Ibarra case as a girl, in the vague way that regional unsolved cases become cautionary local legends. She pulled CPD 1983-2241 in October 2021. The first thing she did was read every document in the case file in sequence before touching the evidence. She spent 3 days doing this. She made notes in a yellow legal pad. On the second day, on page 47 of Detective Mondragon's interview transcripts, she found the overlooked detail. In Leonard Pruitt's October 1st, 1971 statement, a 3-page typed transcript of his interview with Mondragon, Pruitt had described the second vehicle that stopped behind Ramona's Chevette. He had described it as a pickup truck, dark-colored. But in the final line of his description, he had added, had some kind of decal or sticker on the back window, right side. I couldn't read it from where I was, but it caught the light when it turned around. This detail, a rear window decal or sticker on the suspect's pickup, did not appear in Mondragon's summary report. It did not appear in the canvassing records. In the list of 33 vehicles investigated, none had been specifically queried about rear window decals. And on the CPD's list of persons of interest, Dwight Loomis's dark green 1981 Ford F-150 had been described in the original field notes as having. Detective Vega found this in the vehicle canvas records, filed separately from the main case folder. A Canon Air Force Base parking sticker on the rear window, right side. Vega sat with that for a long moment in the evidence room. Then she called Tomas Delgado. She also contacted the NMSP forensic lab in Santa Fe about the surviving evidence. The hair sample E5508, Ramona's own hair, yielding no useful new information, was not the focus. The focus was E5506, the olive green fiber. She requested full forensic re-examination using current analytical capabilities. Simultaneously, Vega located Leonard Pruitt, now 86, retired, living at a care facility in Portales, and she drove there on a Tuesday morning and sat with him in the facility's sunroom. He was sharp-minded, if physically diminished. When she showed him the original interview transcript and read him the line about the sticker, he nodded slowly. That's right. It caught the light when the truck turned around. It was pale-colored, pale yellow or white. I always thought it was one of those base stickers. Vega then began locating Dwight Aaron Loomis. He was now 74. New Mexico DMV records had expired for him after he left the state. Texas DMV showed a Dwight A. Loomis, born 1947, with an address in Lubbock through 2011, after which the record showed a forwarding to an address in Amarillo, Texas. Amarillo PD confirmed a Dwight Loomis at 3314 Hillside Road, Amarillo, with no criminal record. In January 2022, a Vega requested genetic genealogy analysis through the New Mexico Department of Justice's partnership with Othram Incorporated in the Woodlands, Texas. She submitted the olive green fiber from E5506, which had been found on Ramona's driver's seat, for advanced trace DNA extraction. Othram's lab was able to extract a partial nuclear DNA profile from skin cells adhering to the fiber, a capability that had not existed in any practical form in 1983 or for the 2 decades following. The profile was uploaded to GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. Othram's genealogist began building family trees from matching profiles. By April 2022, a cluster of maternal and paternal matches pointed to a family originating in Lubbock County, Texas, with a branch that had produced a male individual, birth year consistent with the mid-1940s, who had served in the US and military during the Vietnam era. That individual was consistent with Dwight Aaron Loomis. Vega coordinated with Amarillo PD and obtained a court order from Potter County District Court for a covert DNA sample. On May 9, 2022, an Amarillo PD officer retrieved a discarded coffee cup from a trash can outside a diner on Hillside Road, where Loomis was known to have breakfast on Thursdays. The cup was submitted to Othram. The DNA profile from the coffee cup matched the profile extracted from E5506 to a statistical probability of 1 in 47 billion. Dwight Aaron Loomis had been in Ramona Delgado Ibarra's car. Dwight Aaron Loomis was arrested on May 23, 2022, at his home at 3314 Hillside Road in Amarillo, Texas. The arrest was executed at 7:15 a.m. by Detective Elena Vega, CPD Detective Marcus Salinas, and 4 Amarillo PD officers, Sergeant Donna Keel, Officer James Tran, Officer Brittany Sorensen, and Officer Carl Webb. Loomis was in his bathrobe when they knocked. He was 74 years old, heavyset, with thinning white hair and pale gray eyes. When Vega told him he was being arrested for the murder of Ramona Esperanza Delgado Ibarra, he stood very still for a moment and then said, "I figured this day would come eventually. Come in, let me put on some clothes." He was transported to the Curry County Adult Detention Center in Clovis. He was represented by Amarillo defense attorney Kenneth Howarth. In subsequent interviews conducted by Vega and New Mexico Department of Justice Special Agent Roslyn Tafoya, Loomis provided a partial confession, enough to establish the core facts, though he minimized and deflected on details he found uncomfortable. He had known Ramona's route. He had watched her for weeks. He had driven past the library, had noted her walking to her car. He had been, by his own subsequent characterization, fixated on her. He had not intended, he claimed, for things to go the way they went. He had pulled his F-150 alongside her on Llano Estacado Boulevard when she stopped briefly at the grain elevator driveway. She had, it appeared, pulled over to check something, possibly an unfamiliar sound from the car. He had got out. What happened after that, the evidence and his partial account made clear. Ramona had struggled. Her glasses had come off and broken. One shoe had come off. She had been overpowered. He had driven her body into the Caliche Flats east of Clovis, like across the state line into Deaf Smith County, Texas, and buried her on a farm field access road he had scouted previously. He could not, or would not, provide the precise location. He said only, east of the line, past Farwell. There's a Caliche road that goes south of Highway 60. I can't remember exactly. A joint search by NMSP, Texas Rangers, and Curry County Search and Rescue was conducted in the Farwell, New Mexico/Farwell, Texas area, the twin towns straddling the state line, in June 2022. Despite extensive ground search and ground-penetrating radar survey of Caliche Road shoulders in a 12-square-mile area, Ramona's remains were not recovered. This was the most painful outcome for the family, that she had been found in truth, but not in body. And the case was prosecuted by Curry County District Attorney Marguerite Baca and Assistant DA Roberto Sandoval. Defense attorney Kenneth Howarth argued that the DNA evidence was circumstantial, that the fiber could have been transferred innocently, and that his client's partial statements were coerced. The jury, seated in Curry County District Court before Judge Alvaro Lucero, disagreed. On November 14, 2022, Dwight Aaron Loomis was convicted of murder in the first degree. On December 5, 2022, Judge Lucero sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Petra Delgado, 92 years old and largely homebound, was not in the courtroom. Tomas Delgado was. He sat in the gallery through the entire trial without missing a day. When the verdict was read, he pressed his face into his hands for a long moment, or his shoulders shaking. Then he looked up at the ceiling of the old courthouse and said quietly, to no one in particular, "Okay, Ramona. Okay?" Detective Elena Vega spoke briefly to reporters on the courthouse steps. Ramona Delgado Ibarra was a librarian who loved books and her family and was on her way to celebrate her cousin's birthday. She deserved justice 39 years ago. I'm glad we could bring it even now. The Clovis Carver Public Library held a small ceremony in November 2022, dedicating a reading bench in the courtyard to Ramona's memory. A plaque was affixed to it, bearing her name, her birth year, and a single line chosen by Tomas from a note Ramona had written in a birthday card to him years ago. Wherever you are, there are books to find and light to read them by. There is a kind of grief that doesn't announce itself. It settles into the ordinary places, the Friday candle, the annual letter to the police, the October 14th drive along a familiar route, and lives there quietly, year after year, until something shifts, until someone finds the detail that was always in the file, waiting to be seen. Ramona Esperanza Delgado Ibarra was a woman who loved libraries and hummingbirds and her family, and the particular pleasure of a good mystery novel solved before the last chapter. She was going to a party in a red dress. She had a gift wrapped in gold paper for a girl turning 15. She had her whole life ahead of her, and it was taken from her on a dark shoulder of road on a windy September evening by a man who had decided her life was his to take. It wasn't. It never was. On modern forensic science, the trace DNA extracted from a fiber that sat in an evidence envelope for 39 years, the genetic genealogy that built a family tree from skin cells, makes a promise to victims like Ramona that time is not the same as safety, that evidence doesn't decay the way justice can. There are families across this country still waiting for the call that Tomas Delgado finally received. Their waiting is not forever. The science is patient. The files are there. The details are in the transcripts, waiting for someone to read far enough. Ramona deserved better. She deserved to see her cousin dance at that quinceañera. She deserved to finish her graduate degree and spend 30 more years in the stacks. But she is not forgotten. Her name is on a bench in the library she loved, and people sit there and read, and the light comes in, and that is something. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to stay with us for our next case.